and well-planned ethnic cleansing of 700. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 was achieved through the ruthless and well-planned ethnic cleansing of 750,000 Palestinians. And this colonial logic of conquest, destruction, and expulsion has continued to the present day. Today, about a third of the Palestinian people live under a brutal military occupation in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza. Israel has stolen land, built Jewish-only settlements, expelled Palestinians, and cornered others into ghettos surrounded by walls, military watchtowers, and checkpoints. 12% of the Palestinian people live inside Israel as third-class citizens. They are subjected to a system of racial discrimination and racist laws that amounts to apartheid, as defined by the United Nations. Half of the Palestinian people continue to live outside Palestine as refugees, denied their right to return to their homes. In 2014, Israel carried out one of its bloodiest ever massacres of Palestinians in the besieged Gaza Strip. More than 2,000 people were killed, a quarter of them children. Israel is only able to maintain its regime of oppression because of the support of international governments and corporations. When those in power refuse to act to stop this injustice, we need a global citizens' response to stand alongside Palestinians in their struggle for freedom, justice, and equality. In 2005, Palestinian civil society came together to issue its call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. The appeal calls for concerted nonviolent action to isolate Israel, as was done to apartheid South Africa. We are calling for boycott pressure on Israel until it complies with international law in the following ways: end its occupation and colonization of land seized in 1967, recognize the right of the Palestinian citizens of Israel to full equality, respect the right of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes. The BDS movement has empowered people across the world to take effective action against Israel. Trade unions, student groups, churches, academics, cultural figures, and social movements are joining together to make an impact. Already, because of BDS, Israeli export companies are complaining that it is getting harder to export their products, and grassroots action has prevented Israeli ships from docking at ports around the world. Major Israeli exporter SodaStream, targeted by our campaign, has announced plans to close a factory it operates in an illegal Israeli settlement. G4S and Veolia, two huge corporations that help Israel maintain its occupation, have lost billions of dollars worth of contracts as a result of BDS activism. Both companies are now talking about ending their role in Israel's crimes. Some European governments are now taking action against aspects of Israel's occupation, and several US academic associations have endorsed a comprehensive academic boycott of Israeli universities. And many prominent musicians and artists support the cultural boycott of Israel, refusing to perform there. Israeli business leaders and politicians are warning that the boycott is starting to isolate Israel. In fact, the government is so worried about the strategic threat that BDS poses to their regime of oppression that it's using its enormous resources to undermine the movement. There's a real fear within Israel that it is fast becoming the pariah state that South Africa once was. Get involved in the BDS movement today. Join or set up a campaign in your local area. Pressurize governments and companies to end their support for Israel's regime of injustice. With BDS, we can all make a real contribution to end international complicity in Israel's crimes against the Palestinian people. Thanks for watching.
Alright, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Vanakkam and ni hao kepada semua yang menonton secara live ataupun secara recording selepas ni. Saya Bun selaku host pada episod ketiga Adakah Israel sebuah negara apartheid. Kita ada tetamu khas yang kita bawa daripada London, Dr. Roland Loh. Tapi sebelum itu, kalau siapa yang menonton tu mungkin boleh komenkan sama ada kualiti suara tu bagus ataupun tidak, dan kalau ada persoalan boleh tanyakan dalam chat box. InsyaAllah kalau yang first time menonton mungkin boleh subscribe, like dan share. Ia agak membantu dan ia adalah percuma. Baiklah, sebelum kita mulakan dengan topik minggu ini, suka saya untuk membacakan beberapa berita terkini mengenai Palestin. Ya. Yang pertamanya adalah, berita yang pertama adalah pada 31 hari bulan 8 2022, Al Jazeera melaporkan Khalil Awaudi, 40 tahun, dilepaskan setelah beliau mogok lapar selama lebih 170 hari kerana membantah penahanannya tanpa bicara dan pendakwaan. Dalam tempoh itu, beliau hanya minum air sahaja. Tapi beliau terpaksa dimasukkan ke hospital, belum dikeluarkan dan dijangka akan keluar pada 2 hari bulan Oktober. Berita kedua merupakan pada 30 hari bulan 8 2022, Time of Israel melaporkan Yahudi kini hanya 47% di bumi sendiri ataupun di bumi Israel. Kita tahu ada Anan Sofer, Profesor Geografi di University of Haifa, mengetahui Radio Israel, selain Arab Israel di Palestin ataupun Arab Israel di Israel, termasuk Muslim dan juga Kristian. Kerana beliau termasuk Palestin yang berada di West Bank, occupied territory di West Bank, dan juga di Gaza adalah melebihi, termasuk juga bukan Yahudi di Israel, adalah melebihi rakyat Israel di Israel. Ya. Dan ini tak campur lagi seperti yang kita bincangkan pada minggu lepas dengan saudara KJ. Kalau campurkan dengan refugee, easily Palestin mendapatkan two-third majority. Baiklah, berita ketiga, pada 1 hari bulan 9 2022, New York Times melaporkan pekerja Google membantah kontrak projek Nimbus yang berharga 1.2 bilion US dollar dengan rejim Israel. Lebih 800 tanda pekerja menandatangani protes itu. Pengkritik lantang mereka yang digambar itu, Cik Coren, 28 tahun, diarah berpindah ke Brazil dalam tempoh 170 hari atau beliau akan hilang pekerjaan. Itulah respon pada Google dengan Amazon. Sebab projek Nimbus bukan projek artificial intelligence. Ya. Dan berita terakhir, berita keempat adalah 4 remaja tidak mahu berkhidmat sebagai tentera Israel ataupun IDF. Sebelum mereka dimasukkan ke penjara kerana membantah conscription, 4 anak muda ini mahu berkongsi alasan mereka untuk tidak berkhidmat di IDF untuk memberi inspirasi kepada umum ataupun rakyat Israel yang lain untuk membantah sistem apartheid yang dilakukan oleh negara mereka sendiri terhadap penduduk Palestin. Baiklah, itulah berita ringkas kita mengenai Palestin yang terkini. Kita akan teruskan memanggil tetamu kita untuk membincangkan adakah Israel sebuah negara apartheid. Dipersilakan Dr. Roland. Apa khabar Dr. Roland?
Okay, selamat malam. So without going to drag into other things, perkara pertama kami perlu bincang jika mau bincang adakah Israel negara apartheid ialah apakah definition apartheid. So pada tahun 1976, UN General Assembly meluluskan satu convention yang dipanggil International Convention on the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime of Apartheid. Dan dokumen itu panjang, tapi dalam dokumen itu artikel 2 dia ada definition. So saya baca dengan ringkas apa definition itu lah. Pertama, klausa A ialah denial to a member or members of a racial group or groups of the right to life and liberty of person by murder of members of a racial group or groups, by infliction upon the members of a racial group or group seriously bodily or mental harm, by the infringement of their freedom of dignity, subjecting them to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, by arbitrary arrest and illegal imprisonment of members of a racial group or groups. Itu adalah relevan bagi Khalil Awaudi yang tadi saudara pun cakap itu. Deliberate imposition on a racial group or groups of living conditions calculated to cause it or its physical destruction in whole or in part. And any legislative measures and other measures calculated to prevent a racial group or groups from participation in the political, social, economic, cultural life of the country, and deliberate conditions to prevent the full development of such groups or groups, in particular by denying to members of a racial group or groups basic human rights and freedoms, including the right to work, the right to form trade unions, the right to education, the right to leave and return to the country, the right to freedom of movement and residence, the right to freedom of opinion and expression. Dan juga any measures, including legislative measures designed to divide the population along racial lines by creation of separate ghettos for the members of a racial group or groups, the prohibition of mixed marriages among members of various racial groups, and the seizure of landed property belonging to a racial group or groups. Dan yang terakhir, persecution of organizations and persons by depriving them of fundamental rights and freedoms because they oppose apartheid.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Roland. Wait, that way you have jumped into a bit far, why Israel is an apartheid state. Basically, terima kasih Dr. Roland. Dia macam apartheid ni, there is a proper definition. Saya dah sharekan dalam ruang komen. Basically, apa yang dimaksudkan dengan apartheid is under Rome Statute. Dia telah ditakrifkan, it must be systematic oppression. Macam Dr. Roland basically ada tiga lah yang mesti kalau macam ada report sebelum international, ada Human Rights Watch, dia kata threshold cross. So they have met all the criteria yang benda tu sebuah negara apartheid yang mungkin Dr. Roland akan perincikan. Okay, Dr. Roland, kalau in Malaysian context, orang selalu cakap, even macam saya pun, kalau apartheid orang cakap South Africa. Apartheid South Africa. So macam mana, kita boleh, apa yang dibuat South Africa adalah sama dengan yang terjadi di Palestin. Mungkin Dr. Roland berkomen dekat situ.
Okay, like the thing is, since we want to go there, like pada tahun 2009, Ronnie Kasril, he's veteran South African ANC anti-apartheid activist. He was good friends with Nelson Mandela. So he himself is Jewish. So in 2009, he gave a speech that says, "In its conduct and methods of repression, Israel came to resemble more and more apartheid South Africa at its zenith. That means at its worst, even surpassing its brutality. House demolitions, removal of communities, targeted assassinations, massacres, imprisonment, and torture of its opponents, collective punishment, and the aggression against neighboring states." This is the Ronnie Kasril. And then when he said, "I will state clearly, without exaggeration, that any South African, whether involved in the freedom struggle or motivated by basic human decency, who visits the occupied Palestinian territories, are shocked to the core at the situation they encounter and agree with Archbishop Desmond Tutu's comment that what the Palestinians are experiencing is far worse than what happened in South Africa." And in 1948, this was in 1948, an Israeli minister himself said, after the Deir Yassin massacre, where 240 Palestinian villagers were killed, said, "Now we too have behaved like the Nazis and my whole being is shaken." This is an Israeli minister who said this, not the Palestinian.
Yeah, even like you said, the late Desmond Tutu, dia dah meninggal as Desmond Tutu, one of the very prominent. I think dia menang Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
And I think he's a Christian. Dia cakap, in fact, the Israel apartheid is much worse because they involve constant military bombardment and harassment and oppression, different rules for people. In fact, the South Africa mungkin bit racism and a little bit of oppression in that sense. But ini dekat di Palestine are consistent using of military arsenals or whatever in oppressing the Palestinian people. So macam mana kalau macam, okay, we have gone a bit, tadi you pun dah garis, mungkin you boleh nak explain sikit reason yang apa yang Israel dah buat, mungkin slowly sikit, yang Israel is an apartheid state. Okay, boleh. Tadi I think you slow a bit too fast on that thing.
Yeah, I'll go back and link that to the closest. Well, most of us probably know, at least have seen the news about Gaza being bombed.
Okay.
And every few years, Israel bombs Gaza. And for example, in the 2014 attack, 550 Palestinian children, including children playing football on the beach, the Baka family children, they were just bombed. I mean, you can't say children playing football on the beach are soldiers or militants or whatever Israel excuses like Israel likes to use whenever it bombs Gaza. These are just children playing football on the beach. And this happens like basically every few years since 2000. It's what Israel calls mowing the lawn. Every few years they bomb Gaza, and the best example as to why you can argue that Israel is an apartheid state is, for example, in the 2018 Great March of Return that the Palestinians from Gaza were doing. I mean, in protest. These were all civilians, no soldiers, no militants, no whatever, no guns or whatever. They were all peaceful protests. So, according to at least most international human rights NGO reports, at least 195 Palestinians were killed, 41 children, and 28,939 were injured by Israeli forces from 30th March 2018 until 22 March 2019. Okay, this is from the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. This were just 6,000 Palestinians from Gaza were injured by live ammunition at protest sites, and 21 children had to get their limbs amputated because of their wounds. 800 of the 6,000 injuries caused by live ammunition were to the legs, and basically more people lost limbs as a result of that completely peaceful protest than even when Israel bombed Gaza in 2014. And again, many of these injuries were extreme bone and tissue damage in the lower legs, especially with large exit wounds, because Israeli soldiers were basically shooting at people's knees and legs. This caused infections, physical disability, paralysis, and many had to get the limbs amputated.
So yeah, Dr. Roland, so one thing that we can conclude here, kita boleh rumuskan dekat sini is Palestine is constantly bombarded, constantly oppressed, constantly macam, you can see macam cakap tadi, I think the Baka family was timbom dekat beach, so mana budak boleh ada cakap army dekat beach, so it doesn't make sense. Even kalau kita nak letakkan the latest incident yang berlaku yang dia bom di dalam flat, ada Palestine Islamic Jihad, yang dia kata as an act of self-defense, you boleh bom dalam flat tu. I think tingkat berapa dan berapa ramai orang mati dekat as collateral damage. How come that you boleh bom dekat flat yang berapa orang lain mati, ada budak 5 tahun pun mati, and sebagai orang tu, you know, it's like preemptive strike, you know, yang you don't care kalau orang lain mati, and orang tu belum attack you lagi. So it's really immoral, illegal. It's you cannot put things into you know. So it's very clear, and they don't care, just probably just to get, you know, vote for the coming election, and you did that. I think with the international.
They even have a term for it. It's called an election war.
Yeah.
Every time Israel has general elections, whoever is in government wants to show that they're tough, and they start bombing Gaza.
No, the thing is, because Palestine is under military occupation or control, macam, I know, Roland, that you are, you know, gang dengan, belong to certain group, man, and I boleh attack you terus, no, macam that preemptive, no, you macam yes, go to another country and bomb, like, no extra judicial killing, you know. So it doesn't really.
This is by Article 2 and the first Clause A of the Convention on Apartheid, that this fits that definition, denial of life, and because they're Palestinians.
Yeah, I got one stupid comedy talk show, and I don't know whether you watch Trevor Noah. I mean, if they can, you hantar drone, you more attack. Why don't you just a drone with hantar a knife? You just kill one person. Just shot, rather than you bomb the flat. There are people there. How could you justify that kind of bombing? So I don't. It's that's one aspect of it. So there is systematic and constantly and we can always watch again and again what they are doing. And in fact, if possible, before we talk on any peace solution, I think we're supposed to talk about stopping the continuous oppression before we're talking about any peace solution. So continue, Roland. So what else from that thing you're talking about marriage? You're talking about
the most obvious thing is the killing. But then, of course, there's also that Gaza has been blockaded for basically since 2007. This is basically 15 years. It's like there are children in Gaza, the young people in Gaza now who have never been able to move at all, even just to the West Bank. Even if they want to go to the West Bank, they cannot. Because and of course, it's not just they can't move. Like I'll give you a specific example. Like in 1996, the prevalence of stunting. This is defined by the World Health Organization as low height for age. Basically, children who are too short for the age, was 8% in Gaza, 7% in the West Bank. And there was no such thing as wasting, which is defined as low weight for age. In 2015, the rate of stunting was 14% in Gaza and 8.2% in the West Bank. So in the West Bank, it hasn't changed. It's just 7% in 1996, 8% in 2015. In Gaza, it was 8% in 2005, and it's 14.2% in 2015. So just the blockade, the restriction of food has meant that the rate of stunting has doubled in Gaza. And the most recent estimates, which were from 2017, they are that 20% of children in Gaza from 2 to 5 years old are stunted. Basically, mean they're not tall enough for the age compared to international standards. So basically,
that's one of stunting. Sorry, go on.
Basically, as an Israeli politician pointed out, the idea is to put the Palestinians on a diet, but to make them not die of hunger. That was how he brazenly said this to defend what they're doing. And as Professor Jasbir Puar has said, that this stunting of children in Gaza is a result of the deliberately imposed Israeli blockade. Because her argument is that this targeting and degradation of the physical and mental health of Palestinian youth is where Israel is deliberately trying to harm their health as a form of biopolitical control to weaken future resistance. And this is violation of Article 2, again, and Clause B of the Convention, because Israel deliberately seeks to harm the entire Palestinian population, the children.
Yeah, even at one UN report say by 2020, Gaza is supposed to be unlivable, because when you said that the nutrition, the food content that they get, basically all, even toys to go into Gaza, they have to go through Israeli military checkpoint. They cannot from air, from sea, from. Basically, that is the biggest open air prison in the world. And in fact, the drinking water to the part is undrinkable. The sewage basically just go to the sea and again, macam you cakap, memang dia buat, they just let them, die, but not until death. Or how you put it, macam,
Basically, no, it's not. Basically, I didn't put it this way. An Israeli politician, when he was defending this policy, he himself said, the idea is to put the Palestinians on a diet, but to make them not die. Because if the Palestinians all just start dying in large numbers, the world cannot pretend anymore. It cannot close both eyes. So it just make them suffer, and some die, but not all die.
Yeah. This is what Ilan Pape also said. What they are doing now, like you said, they cannot simply bomb and kill millions of people, but they make it systematically unlivable wherever they are in that place. I mean, they harass them, they perempuan, all through military checkpoint and whatnot, until they move out voluntarily anywhere but Israel, and the numbers is basically reduced in that sense. But one thing, if you notice just now, I've read the news about the demographic of Israel. Basically now they are in the minority, only 47%. Even with this current condition, the Arabs multiply a lot more than the Israel. And to be fair, on certain sense, it's not Israel. I think all over the world, the richer you are, you have less children. And the poorer you are, you tend to have more children in that sense, especially the Muslim. The way we see things is a bit different. That is one. Probably you just want to add on that. I think not many people. There are 4 types of citizen of Palestine with different rights in Israel or in Palestine. You want to touch on that? Whether all these people also subject to apartheid in that sense?
Basically, because Israel, it's all the Palestinians, whether those with Israeli citizenship, those in the West Bank, those in Gaza, those in East Jerusalem, and the refugees abroad, they're all, in the end, under Israeli control, because Israel, if they want to go live in Palestine, Israel controls how they live. So basically, Israel keeps them to a different package of rights to try to divide them. With the goal is that, so Palestinians in Gaza, where Gaza is blockaded, their situation is different from that of those in the West Bank, or those permanent residents in East Jerusalem, or those in basically with Israeli citizenship. But the one thing is, compared to, so any Jewish person in the world, or their children, or grandchildren, or spouses, anyone they marry, is entitled to emigrate to Israel at any time and receive Israeli citizenship. There's no restriction at all. As long as the person is Jewish, their children, their spouses, all can go. Compared to, say, this is not the case for Palestinians. By the way, this even applies to Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship. If they want to marry, say, anyone else, even say, let's say a Palestinian from the West Bank, or a Palestinian, I don't know, who is living in Malaysia, or even a non-Palestinian, say a Palestinian with Israeli citizenship, they want to marry a Malaysian, they need to inform, basically the Palestinian needs to inform the Palestinian who has Israeli citizenship, they need to inform the Israeli government that they are marrying this foreigner, and they are required to have a 27-month cooling off period of at least half a year. This is basically, a policy that was dated February 2022, 97 pages from the Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories, and it's called Procedure for Entry and Residence of Foreigners in the Judea and Samaria area. So basically, any Israeli citizen, any Jewish person, anywhere in the world can aliyah to Israel, can what they call return to Israel.
Return to Israel.
But if you are, say, and your citizen, and they can get Israeli citizenship, and their citizenship will immediately transfer to the children and to anyone they marry. But if a Palestinian Israeli citizenship marries, say, someone else, their citizenship does not transfer.
Yeah. So that's basically the hypocrisy, the double standard, racism that
So,
is, on the.
yeah, I mean, again, this isn't even blockading Gaza or what. This is applies even to Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship.
Yeah.
Their citizenship is conditional and it's based on basically them not opposing the Israeli government, basically.
Yeah, I mean, if they see, basically there are four types of passport. They call it in Gaza, in Palestine for Palestine. I think the first one is the Arab Palestine who live in Israel proper. Just make about 20% of them. These kind of people can go anywhere. I mean, except for like you said, kalau dia nak kahwin tu, you have about 27 cooling off period. Basically, dia punya spouse or husband doesn't automatically become an Israeli citizen in that sense lah. And there are some other things as well. They can't simply marry whoever they want. I think the next in line after the Arab Israel is basically those living in the East Jerusalem.
Yeah, East Jerusalem.
I think about 50,000 of them, and basically kalau dia duduk more than
500,000.
Okay. And about 14,000 has been revoked the punya citizenship kalau dia duduk more, they stay out more than certain period of time lah.
They are defined as not citizens but permanent residents, except it's permanent, as in permanent quotation marks, as in like as you said, if they stay out for after a certain period, it can just be revoked.
Yeah.
Because Israel then says that is not their home anymore.
Yeah. So even they study in Malaysia, so the first is Arab Israel, second one is basically those stay in East Jerusalem. The second that but they cannot simply travel. They have to get permission, right, from Israeli military. And the third one is basically those living the West Bank. They also cannot. They got, I think, about 600 checkpoints if you go to any parts of the. And the last one is basically those living in Gaza, about 2 million people, the biggest prison. So even people in Gaza cannot go out. I think there is one Malaysia, Nuri Al Nadir. I think he lived there. For him to go back and out, it's like they have to queue. Basically, lepaskan berapa orang untuk keluar outside the Gaza, and it's very difficult. So that is the situation. Tapi kalau daripada East Jerusalem, you mau pergi jadi pasport, you mau downgrade, okay. Nak duduk dekat West Bank ataupun Gaza, okay. But from Gaza untuk pergi West Bank atas tak boleh. They cannot be upgrade in that sense. They can go downgrade in that sense. Okay, so basically they all. Kalau I ada satu, this is basically Agnes Callamette, Amnesty International Secretary General, cakap, our report reveals the true extent of Israel apartheid regime, whether they live in Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the rest of the West Bank, or Israel itself. Basically yang kita discuss tadi. Palestinians are treated as an inferior racial group and systematically deprived of their rights. We found out that Israel's cruel policies of segregation, dispossession, and exclusion across all territories under its control clearly amount to apartheid. The international community has an obligation to act. So this is basically what we are doing. We try to create awareness among at least Malaysian in Malaysian contact or people outside Malaysia if they watch this session. Apart from it, you can join a campaign wherever you are, or just straight to BDS Movement International. Basically, they are organized, they're founded by 170 Palestinian NGO and civil society. Ini nak cakap pasal Malaysian contact. Dr. Roland, orang ada cakap, Malaysia pun sama jugalah. Malaysia pun, you being Malaysian Chinese, but of course you're living in UK, but now you're coming back. So how do you respond to that Malaysia also practice system of apartheid, especially in relation to, macam cakap Charles Santiago, in relation to the poor Indians? The Indians is really the hard-pressed group in Malaysian context. So how do you tell Malaysian in that regard? In a simplified form.
Yeah, I mean, the simplified argument is I get that Malaysian politics, we sometimes have a tendency to argue about race a lot, and Personally, I don't like that. And again, I understand and agree that there are legitimate reasons to sometimes for some Chinese and Indians, especially the poorer Chinese and poorer Indians, to be unhappy about like university allocations for matriculation and scholarships and all that. But it's not apartheid in the sense that, in the way Israel is as defined under international law or even under South Africa, because there isn't, I guess, the thing is, in the Malaysian context, the argument is at least the intention or the stated intention for racially based policies is to uplift poor Malays. It's not, at least the stated intention is not ketuanan Melayu and to get rid of the Chinese and Indians. Whereas in South Africa, the stated thing was white supremacy. In Israel, the stated thing is basically Jewish supremacy. That's the stated policy and that's the intention. So at least in Malaysia, there are politicians who do want to get rid of the Chinese and the Indians, but that's not the stated government policy. And in general, if you just walk around in Malaysia, you live in Malaysia, yes, there's discrimination, especially like, for example, university places, especially for the poorer Indians and Chinese, but there's no systematic desire to kill Chinese or Indians or to try to destroy Chinese and Indian communities and to get rid of us, basically. I can't hear you.
I put myself on mute because I'm batuk. So memang.
Okay.
Okay. Speaking of, and especially those who really, speaking from, I mean, in especially Malay who claim they are Muslim, and because all nations are basically Malay, they are by default they're supposed to be Muslim in that sense, and dalam at least I'm a Muslim also. Dalam Quran, kalau dia percaya Quran is the word of God, it's very clear, Roland. I just quote this Surah Hujurat ayat chapter 49 verse 13. It said basically, oh mankind, ya Yuhannas, inna khalaqnakum min zakarin wa unsa. Basically, I've created you men and women, and I created you into tribes and nations for you to know each other, not for you to fight each other. So that is very clear. And the best among you, inna akramakum indallah, in the sight of God, is basically those who are pious, nearer to God, piety, the righteous. And God says, further says, conclude on that verses 13, it's basically, in Allah, alimun habir. Basically, God knows, Basically, that I'm the pious person. No, you cannot claim that. No, you just do good. Whether you're good or not, you're probably better than me. So no one can judge anyone, for that matter. We are created different to make this country, this world colorful, Not to claim that you are superior than other people, at least on that racist basis. Now, on the justice basis, I will share with you this. It so happened that last week I do this thing. I got my own talk show, this Bone Reflection series. Because Islam is very much for justice, This is basically Surah Al-Nahl, basically chapter 16, verses 1 to 5. Suruhlah ke jalan Tuhanmu dengan hikmah kemanusiaan, berbahasa dengan cara lebih baik. So, kamu jujur dengan kita akan orang sesat jalan. This is not the one, sorry. Okay, menegakkan keadilan. This is basically okay. I went to AG office last week. So I saw dekat dia punya the main entrance, there is this Surah Al-Nisa. Surah Al-Nisa chapter 4 verses 135. It's dia letak kat situ, orang yang beriman is basically those who have faith dan akan menjadi orang yang sentiasa menegakkan keadilan. you must sentiasa menegakkan keadilan. I'll share with you this one. This one diletak di AD office pintu masuk. It's a big plug. I ada tengok gambar. Okay, this is the one I nak share tadi, sorry. Surah Nisa ayat 135. Pas ni especially to Malay lah. Saya akan menegakkan keadilan lagi menjadi saksi. Be the witness kerana Allah sekalipun terhadap diri engkau sendiri. Even though whatever that you say can can make yourself go to prison, or even for your ibu bapa or your kaum kerabat or your own kind. Jangan cakap pasal parti. Even against your own self. Then I cakap lagi satu ada satu surah ni, surah 61 and verses 3 is basically also share. God say, and this is chapter 61 verses 3, amat besar kebencian di sisi Allah, kamu melakukan sesuatu yang kamu tidak melakukannya. 61:3. God marah sangat kalau you preach something but you don't walk the talk. You cakap pasal keadilan, but on the other hand, you're not being fair on that sense. So this is to me when you kalau Melayu memang susah, you surah Cina lahir. Apa mana? I surah Melayu, surah India. But inside for God don't care about religion, about races, whatnot. In Islam, what God cares is about justice. Of course, you aspire. You must, as much as possible, try to be fair in that sense. So sorry, I'm saying, I'm just add to that thing. Of course, in Malaysian context, it's not up to, like you said, Aparteid International macam cakap awal tadi, there is a proper definition of what is apartheid. Maybe there's some form of discrimination, positive discrimination, whatever, but we should strive to do better in that sense lah. Macam you cakap, I can talk to Roland, I can talk to other people, I got plenty of non-Muslim friends, but we have to, menegakkan keadilan. So that is very important. That is closer to taqwa. That is what's all purpose of a Muslim. I mean, that this is I'm trying to share with you lah on that. Coming from my own perspective, I'm trying to share.
I get it. My argument isn't that we don't have racial issues in Malaysia. We do, and all of us probably have opinions on how to resolve them. But it's just that all I'm saying is that Malaysia is not apartheid. That's it. I'm not saying we don't have issues and all that. We do. And we should try to work to resolve them and all that.
Yeah, okay. Of course, apartheid we're not there lah. Probably some form of racism, maybe ada lah. And Islam against racism in that sense lah. We try to be, because Islam is all about justice lah. Try to make a just world. So you cannot say you you're not being fair on that, but you want to be fair on this side. So it's where possible, we try to menegakkan keadilan. So that is closer to taqwa, that is closer to righteousness. I'm just not talking about Palestine issue. To me, the greater thing is anywhere in the world, people can subscribe to justice. And if you say that there's I think that we disagree with you or anyone else, we try to discuss secara baik, respectfully and openly. I think that's a spirit of, we are about one people, in this world. We share the same place, the same world. As much, this is to me, I don't know. That's how I'm coming from. That's why I'm doing this thing. It's about.
Well, I can briefly. The thing is, before I went basically abroad to study, I grew up in Malaysian context. Malaysian context is Palestine is seen as a Malay Muslim issue. So if you're not Malay or Muslim, you just don't get too involved. You don't get involved with it at all. Then there was once you look, when I went abroad, I had a few, I had one Iranian housemate, a few Saudi friends, and sometimes they would just, if there was some Palestinian talk, they just asked me to come along to listen. Then, once you listen to what's happening, it's very obvious that this is gross injustice. It's not even just small issue or what. It's very clear what's happening, and it's very clear what's happening is unjust and unfair, and also in violation of a whole bunch of international human rights agreements and whatever.
Of course. Well, I mean, we agree with that. That is a simple, we're talking about apartheid as per Rome Statute definition, the convention, the racism is another aspect of it. But what I'm trying to say, by the spirit of justice, we try to, because at the end of the day, to me, we want to make this world a better place for everyone. I think that's about why we are doing BDS for freedom, for equality, for justice. So that's why anywhere in the world where there is injustice, we should fight for it. Especially those who claim they are Muslim, because that is basically ordered by God to do justice. So to me, that's very important. And and more important, you should walk your talk wherever you are. So again,
Well, can I just add a little bit to that?
yeah,
With regards to the apartheid thing, I think one thing that the Malaysian government should do, because if it's going to argue at the international level on behalf of Palestinians that Israel is an apartheid state, and it should, because is that Malaysia should ratify the International Convention on Punishment and Crime of Apartheid, because Malaysia has not ratified it, even after like how many, it was like this was passed by the UN General Assembly in 1976, and Malaysia still has not ever ratified it. So
yeah.
it's
That is a bit,
for the foreign minister to have credibility to say, go tell other foreign ministers that Israel is an apartheid state, when Malaysia has not ratified the International Convention on the Suppression of Apartheid.
yeah. That's an interesting point that you make. Some say even from the PH side, say due to that, he was basically the person who tried to moot that idea, and due to that, they said too soon, too early, and there is more fakat. Naturally, talking about politics, and the PH
Right.
was basically toppled down because of that. He said not, he tried to deny that. I mean, but the whole nation the whole PSA was basically scapegoating him in that sense. Maybe to a certain extent, it's true. I
I'm
mean,
not talking about ICET or the Rome ICC statute. Like this is a specific convention on just apartheid. It's not ICET. It's not on other human rights issues. It's just the apartheid convention. That one Malaysia still hasn't ratified.
yeah, I mean, we can discuss that. In fact, I'll discuss also in my own talk show on that issue. I'll try to try to see arguments from all sides. Where we should. I'm more interested of try to be fair. That if you have anything that we disagree, we should be able to talk. Respectfully, in open fashion. In that sense. If you want to make this world a better place, I think that's the way forward. Of course, we have our own views on certain things. Macam you cakap, some people also say, I discussed last week on Najib, what is our reaction or reflection on that thing? Because some people also claim they were victim of political persecution in that sense. God knows why. So I don't want to comment on that on the show. That's
Yeah, no
become
problem.
politics in that sense. But that's how people talk and think. I don't think kalau kita boleh agree to disagree, we talk nicely. I think that's supposed to how we should move forward. I think we talk dah masuk a bit more on politics in that sense. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for saying this necessary talk. This is a question for Boon and Lo. In Malaysian context, although we have never had a chance to dig it into, in spite of the straying for, I cannot really read because can you read?
Yeah, thank you for hosting this necessary talk. This is a question for Boon and Lo. In Malaysian context, although I've never had a chance to dig into it in spite of staying 4 years already, we do have a lot of racism. My skin color gives people the impression that I'm Indian when I'm from Bangladesh. I did face circumstances I had no idea how to interpret, although every day people still live together no matter what race they come from. At this time, Israel is also a great ally of the Indian. Okay, that's all I can see now. I can't see the rest of this.
Well, every day people still live together no matter what race they come from. At the same time, Israel is also a great ally of Indian. So you want to comment on that?
I don't know. Like when Israel is, I mean, the thing with a great ally of India is that how is Israel helping India if you want to talk about that Israel is a great ally of India? Like part of it is, I guess, because some of the Hindutva, basically I guess you can call them Hindu extremists.
Nationalists
Hate
or whatever it is. Yeah.
They hate Muslims, and so Palestine is seen as a Muslim cause. So they want to work with Israel on that to hate Muslims. But I don't really see how that is relevant with regards to Malaysia. I mean, as I said, I don't disagree that we have lots of racial issues in Malaysia. Oh, okay. The question was about Kashmir and Palestine.
Interesting.
The
Yeah.
parallel we see in the two colonies and the two racist policies. I mean, yes, I agree. Like, just speaking for myself, my view on Kashmir is that the people of Kashmir should be allowed to democratically decide what future they want, whether they want to be with India or with Pakistan or independent. Again, this is my personal view. Like,
Yeah,
what's-
from what I've spoken to some Kashmiri people, they don't want India or Pakistan. They just
Yeah.
the land for Kashmir people. I mean, they
Yeah,
want any side.
that's why I said they should be able to democratically decide what are the three options, not two options, three options.
Yeah.
India, Pakistan, or independent. I mean, they should because okay.
Yeah, I how we talk that Kashmir, probably one day I got followers from my talk show. They also want to talk about Kashmir in nation context. Probably you can get some people from Kashmir to, probably on my side I can have the leeways of doing whatever I want. I'll contact you Asif later on, probably of unwanted racial sentiments. To me, I don't know. I at least on personal basis, I really into that. No, into I speak about politics, I speak about religion from different angles. No, I want to have that healthy discussion on topic that we disagree. No? That I can inspire a positive discussion among different different group of people, rather than you talk to your own kind, which is to me, even in this Palestinian context, I always see what the Israel says about Palestine on that issue. I always only see on that side because I'm trained. I'm trained to how Chinese see Islam, Malay, and stuff like that. I always read comment from the other side. I try to see comment from all sides in that sense. Yeah, tapi I think it's not about Kashmir. I think one last question I want to ask you, Roland. Probably this one. How that we can, living in Malaysia, that we should, I don't know, probably inform other non-Muslim who basically think of Palestinian issue is basically a Muslim and Malay issue, not this humanity issues in that sense. How that people like you can really into BDS, which is to me quite extremist in a sense, who fight for Palestinian cause in that sense.
Well,
You really put your time in, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it just now that you see this as a justice issue, and I think if BDS wants, if the goal is to get more non-Muslims in Malaysia to at least care about BDS or about Palestinians in general, it's framing this as a justice issue and basically not being, if people argue that, okay, you say Israel is an apartheid state, what about Malaysia? We need basically to explain that, one, we are against Israel because it's racist, and we are like as you said just now, it's you are against it because it's injustice, and you are against it everywhere.
Yeah.
not just particular places.
Yeah, anywhere in the world. I mean, we are all, to me, how I see it as a Muslim, we are all brothers, sisters from the same great grandparents, you know. Like ni, as I said, Tokmu and Tokmu sama. We share the same. Then why should we fight? I do not see that thing as a basis. I forgot to share Amnesty International video on apartheid. Probably that can give a better representation of what we're talking. They got some pictures and you know, that thing. I'll share with you.
Isn't just a description of what happened in South Africa. It is also a crime against humanity under international law. Israel is committing the crime of apartheid throughout the occupied Palestinian territories and within Israel. Apartheid is a crime against humanity, committed with the specific intent of maintaining a cruel system of control by one racial group over another. Israel has imposed a racist system of oppression and domination over Palestinians that amounts to apartheid, and it's time to dismantle this system. For over 73 years, Israel has forcibly displaced entire Palestinian communities and demolished hundreds of thousands of Palestinian homes and structures. Today, over 150,000 Palestinians face losing their homes, while 6 million remain as refugees. Palestinians live under a system of racial segregation. Road closures, checkpoints, apartheid walls, and legal status based on residence all control Palestinian lives. They keep families apart and oppress the population wherever they live. Israel's aim is to maintain control over the land and demography, and so it bars Palestinian refugees from returning home. Some families have been displaced for generations. Palestinians living under apartheid in Gaza, the West Bank and throughout Israel have been calling out apartheid for generations. For too long, Israel has been getting away with crimes against humanity. But change is possible. It is time to dismantle apartheid, and the first step is to call it what it is. End Israel's apartheid.
Yeah, the first one is basically calling what it is, calling a spade a spade. Apartheid is apartheid, no matter how you want to. In fact, it's the worst version of apartheid, according to Desmond Tutu or some other South African, independent from the NC group. Roland, we are nearing our show, so probably you just want to give, your last words on this. Whether it's Israel, you want to conclude the whole discussion before next week we're going to go on.
To conclude, I would say that the apartheid framework has been established in international law, and with South Africa as a specific example. And what tactics to use has also been established already, like basically boycott, divestment, sanctions, so that for example, by the time apartheid ended, like South Africa was basically a pariah state, and they were kicked out of all the international sports competitions, kicked out from basically everything. This framework has already been established, and so we don't have to reinvent a new framework. We can just apply this framework to what Israel is doing, since Israel fits the framework too, both in terms of definition, in terms of international law, and in terms of what we can do, which is, for example, boycott, divestment, sanctions.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Roland. Basically, that's the conclusion. We have the South African model, which is worked there. I think the last thing that break the camel's back, orang kata, until dia punya boycott tu dah sampai sports boycott. Maybe they were pulau dekat situ in UN, people just walk away from the hall. I think the last one was the sports boycott, when they boycott South Africa. That thing that's really made them. Of course, there's so many other factors as well. International pressure we got everywhere. The government start boycotting, and then the things come to fruitful fruition in that sense. So with that, I like to thank Dr. Roland, and don't forget next week. Next week we'll hear how the Israel respond to this Amnesty International report we are labeling them as an apartheid state and how we debunk the debunk of Israel. Thank you, Roland. We'll see you again, inshallah, in 2 weeks' time. All right, guys, basically that's from us. We'll see you again in 14 days' time, basically on the 17th of September at the same time, 10 p.m. With that, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Terima kasih.